Hey everyone, welcome to yet another episode of What I've Been Watching. I watched 4 movies this week, not a ton. World events kind of got in the way, but let's talk about them. Widows is a 2018 crime thriller which stars Viola Davis, Michelle Rodriguez, and Cynthia Erivo. It was directed by Steve McQueen, who directed 12 Years a Slave. If you've seen any of his movies, he deals in dark subject matter, and this movie is no different. It is about a heist that goes wrong and the women that are left behind to pick up the pieces of their family, as they have to embark on a heist of their own to make things right. The easiest comparison for Widows, I think, is to give this movie very high praise for feeling like Michael Mann's Heat. Yes, this is a heist film. Yes, it does get violent, but this is mostly a drama about people trying to keep their lives together. That's not all in content, it's also in feel and pacing. It helps that this movie was shot on film. That film look makes the movie feel older and more distinguished than newer, less distinguished movies. But the movie is solid across the board, especially in the acting department. I don't think Viola Davis is capable of giving a bad performance. It also has strong supporting performances from Michelle Rodriguez and Cynthia Erivo. Michelle Rodriguez has been delegated so long to the Fast and the Furious series that I tend to forget how good she can be when given good material. And while the women in this film are the main characters, there are solid supporting performances from the men. Liam Neeson, Colin Farrell, Robert Duvall. I always forget about how much I like Colin Farrell as an actor until I see him in something, and I think, man, he should be in more stuff. I really enjoy him, and I liked him in this movie, as well as Liam Neeson and Duvall. With solid performances across the board and well-shot, well-written material, this feels like an important film. I put it up there with Heat. I really do. I think it has the same feel and the same prestige as a movie like Heat. Time will tell if it holds on as much as Heat has in my brain, but for now, I thought it was very entertaining and a well-made movie across the board. Ready or Not is a 2019 horror comedy directed by the guys from Radio Silence, and this movie is a Blu-ray that I bought in a big blitz at the end of last year. I watched this film as part of 366 2020, and immediately wanted to buy it. The problem being that it's not in super high supply right now. I had to wait and wait until Amazon had copies, and even then it was like a month until it shipped. But it finally came and I got to rewatch it, and man, this movie's just a riot. It not only does variations on a theme very well, but it has this very dry sense of humor that I can get behind. I just have a ton of fun with this thing. I've bought it for a reason. I can't wait to see what Radio Silence does with Scream 5. I'm super excited for that. But I really dig this movie from top to bottom. Beaver Trilogy Part IV is a 2015 documentary film about a series of short films directed by this guy, Trent Harris. Harris was an aspiring filmmaker. He was working at a television station, testing out their new videotape equipment, when he happened upon a guy who was taking pictures of the station's helicopter. The man, who would become known as Groovin' Gary, was a very light-hearted, very happy-go-lucky soul, and Trent was immediately drawn to him. Groovin' Gary invited Trent to come to Beaver, Utah to check out a talent show that he was taking part in, and that's where things started to get a little strange. But of that footage, Trent made a short film. And then, throughout the years, once right after and once as his thesis at AFI, he remade the original film using actors. The first one starred a little-known actor at the time named Sean Penn. And the third version of this film starred an up-and-coming actor named Crispin Glover. Of course, both those actors would go on to superstardom, but Trent Harris never found those heights. And this documentary, Part 4, is not a Part 4 per se. It's more a telling of the history of the Beaver Trilogy trying to make some sense of what happened to Groove and Gary while also tying it into Trent Harris's life. The documentary tries to find a higher meaning in these three films, and it pulls it off pretty well. It's a good magic trick. The first act is very much just here's what happened, but the later stages of this documentary really tie all the stories together as not just a story of Groove and Gary, but a story of Trent Harris's career and life. It's all really compelling stuff. It's narrated by Bill Hader. Trent Harris's career has had its ups and downs, and he's very interesting. The whole thing is intriguing and interesting as hell. And I really like what they did with it, making the original films not so much about Groove and Gary, which they are, but more about the entire Groove and Gary, Trent Harris dynamic. I thought it was really interesting. It's on Amazon Prime right now. You don't really have to have seen the original Beaver Trilogy for this movie to work. I haven't seen the Beaver Trilogy, but I think it works in addition to that. And last but no way least, Bad Times at the El Royale is a 2018 thriller directed and written by Drew Goddard. It stars Jeff Bridges, our old friend Cynthia Erivo, Dakota Johnson, John Hamm, Chris Hemsworth, Nick Offerman. This movie's got a great cast. The film takes place in a hotel, the El Royale, which straddles the California-Nevada state line. And the film is about this cast of characters that come together and their worlds collide in deadly ways. This film feels a lot like a Quentin Tarantino movie. Early Tarantino, when he was having fun and not trying to make important films. The first two acts of this movie feel a lot like the last act of Jackie Brown. A lot of it feels like Pulp Fiction. A lot of Hateful Eight going on here. The Tarantino comparisons could go on for days. And the first two acts of this film is when it's doing its best stuff. You're learning about the characters, you're seeing each of their stories intertwine with each other, and all that stuff is a ton of fun. But in the third act of this film, I don't feel like it falls off the rails. I feel like it trips a little bit. The madcap energy from the first two acts kind of goes by the wayside, and what we get is a much slower ending to a film. It is a lot of all the characters in one room talking to each other about a situation. And that's disappointing given that there is a twist at the start of the third act of this movie that I didn't see coming, didn't expect, and I thought was really interesting. They just didn't do much with it. The third act just doesn't feel as sharply tuned as the first two acts. And this movie being almost 2.5 hours, you could have trimmed easily 5 minutes off this thing, 10 minutes off this thing, and still had essentially the same movie with the same content, but a better pace in the later stages. I didn't feel the tension that I feel that Drew Goddard wanted me to feel in the third act. I feel like it slowed down and became tedious. Like I said, the movie doesn't fall off the rails as much as it just kind of stumbles. Having said that, the performances are all generally good. Jeff Bridges is great in the movie. Cynthia Erivo is great. She sings a lot in this movie and she has a beautiful voice, so that's always a joy. And it sets up some interesting interactions between the characters. But while I feel that the film didn't necessarily drop any of the balls it was juggling, it definitely threw a few of them out of its reach. All right, that's it for this episode. I don't think I'm going to do comments this week just because I want to get back to watching more movies. I will see you guys next week. Thanks for watching.